Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for Friends of the CSC. Is that what they're called?
Yes.
That's what you are, who you are. Thanks for being friends to the CSC, and thanks for the community that forms here when you gather like this and get to know each other a bit. There are refreshments afterwards, I believe, up in the Commons for everybody. If you can stay, you'll stay way warmer here than you will on the way home. But braving the elements tonight is a good thing. I'm really glad you're here. Also, I wanted to acknowledge that Kathleen Davis will be the next speaker for this gathering. Kathleen Davis, I'm not sure, we don't have a date yet for her, but she'll be talking about some aspect of mysticism. You've probably seen her around here often. She and her husband are a big part of this community. They're amazing. And Kathleen is a powerful woman in the church, like Sister Linda. So we're in terms of introducing Linda, it's really almost impossible to capture this woman. It's like containing steam. It just doesn't work. But she's an incredible human being. I love her to death. We worked together for 14 years here before she got elected to service to her religious community, which is the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. They're also incredible women, I might add. Back in about 2014, I think, we gave Sister Linda the Newman Award, the coveted award for which everybody longs. I couldn't think of her. But we gave it to her because she's an incredible human being, and this is what we give this award to people who we want our students to grow up like. And she embodies that in almost every way. Her time here was energizing, to say the least, life-giving. She always said she loved to be here, and she loved to love our students. In this home away from home, she helped create along the way. Linda's able to be vulnerable, and she's able to be real. Her laughter is contagious, and she's reminded us again and again that religion is not for the stuffy, and that's really refreshing to hear. She laughs out loud and really very loud. And I used to love the way she loved the students. I mean, they could tell she liked them, and that's not a small thing either. Let me conclude by simply saying, well, two things. One is she did lots of miracles here. So when she dies, she will be canonized quickly, because I can name at least 2 miracles that she did while she was alive, and that's changing students' hearts. And I mean dramatically. She even got one to start to love me. Remember that? And I ended up doing their wedding, which was really crazy. But the last thing I want to say is Linda loves the church. She really does. She's a woman who's feisty in her thinking and grounded in her theology. She has strong personal opinions, and she knows how to represent the teaching of the church as well. She has had, off and on, as many of us have, more of a lover's quarrel with the church than outright needing to not be one. And that lover's quarrel will be on display, I trust, tonight as well. She has a passion for the church being full and for justice and good leaders in our church. Rumor has it, Pope Francis studied under her. So I present to you tonight this woman who actually had another profound effect, if I could add one more thing. On the Sea of Galilee, just recently, 42 of us were floating on those sacred waters, and we were there in a storm, and the waves were not making us sick, but it was strong wind, it was freezing cold, and Linda brought us all to attention by calling us to one word, and it was the word trust. And 2 people from that trip said that was the highlight of their pilgrimage. So, Linda, thanks for all you do for us. I don't get to do this publicly very often, but you're amazing, and I love you to death.
I love you. Oh, wow, I don't know after all that. Anyway, I am delighted to be here. We are friends, and we all know each other pretty well. There are too many faces here that I don't know. And I'm very delighted to share around a topic that has, at least for 45 years, been very significant in my own faith development. And Gary's right. I have had quarrels with the church, sometimes very angry fights, in a sense. We've had fights here, but that isn't unhealthy, nor is it a bad thing. So this evening, what I hope to do really is open some doors for you. We cannot cover 2,000 years of women's leadership in less than an hour. We just can't do that. So I'm going to be going kind of quickly, but hopefully there'll be some avenues you're going to want to explore yourself a little more deeply. In this presentation, I hope to show you how women have been active leaders in the church since its early formation, beginning with the Gospels and Jesus' treatment of women. It was very countercultural to his time. It was unusual in the time of Jesus for women to be disciples, to be followers, to be with him on his missionary journeys. And then we move into the early church, the time of St. Paul and the missionaries. And again, we see leaders and women leaders, co-workers with Paul. We're going to look at some of them. Then we move away from the times of the canonical writings, the New Testament, and what do we have to help us to explore women's roles? We turn to epigraphical information and archaeological information, and we're going to look a little bit at that. There's lots to plumb in that area. And that takes us up to about the Middle Ages, when things really do change. And we're going to look at women leaders that you're very familiar with just real briefly in the Middle Ages and up to the modern times. So let's get started. I'm going to start with the background, which all the feminist theologians start with, which is, what is your image of God? Has your image of God changed at all since you were a child? I mean, let's take a look here. Oh, no, naturally, let's turn it on. Is your image of God, like Sandra Schneider said, 2 men and a bird? Is it hierarchical? You got your lead God, and then your spirit God, and then Jesus? Or is it kingship, ruling? Or is it rather vague and symbolic to you? Let me share with you a slide of my favorite icon of the Trinity, which actually, I didn't pull it out, but I will pull it out, is used by Richard Rohr in the Divine Dance. This icon is from the 15th century. It's Andrei Rublev, and I know it's many people's favorite icon, and it is one that I have prayed with for many years. Notice in this icon, there is no hierarchy. The three of the Trinity are in sort of what I would call a semicircle, sitting around a table. Very relational, very communal. And notice that the onlooker is invited in. The table's open. So this is an image of God that is inclusive, welcoming, relational, communal. And Richard Rohr, if you haven't read this, I know many of you have, he uses that image because he starts off with his title, The Divine Dance. He takes that image of the dance from the 4th century Cappadocians, Eastern, whose metaphor for God was of a dance. So think of God as a partner, as a person who plays with you, as someone who loves you, who co-creates with you. So this is a dynamic God. Now, why we begin there is because whatever your image of God is, does influence how you interpret the Gospels. Okay? So I'm saying, real honestly, that this is one of my very favorite images of God. And just for a moment think, well, what's my image of God? How do I look at God? Okay, we're going to turn to now the Gospels. Now, of course, this is a huge topic, but we're going to pick out a few stories and look at them. In the time of Jesus, women were considered undeveloped men. Undeveloped men. That was what they thought. They could not rise to the excellence, the knowledge, whatever, the power of men. And so women were often not really entrusted with the mission or the truth or the leadership, okay? And let's look at what Jesus does, because I think he's very countercultural to the patriarchal society that he was born into, which, by the way, is still all around us. You know, patriarchal society is the men are in the leadership positions of society and in politics. They have the moral authority. They own the property. This is how it was for Jesus' time. But, well, it's not quite like that with him. He lets women touch him. He lets a woman wash his feet. He talks with a woman. And he has women who are disciples mentioned in every gospel. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna, and other women who not only traveled with Jesus, which was highly unusual for women, but participated in his ministry, and guess what? They were providers. So these women had some money. They had some resources. So we want to just kind of look at just a few of the women in the life of Jesus, starting with two women that I think very much changed his mind. And the first, of course, we all know, Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary of Nazareth, this simple, young woman. How did she change his mind? Well, some of us had the privilege of going to Cana, and in that story, here's what we hear. They're at a wedding feast. Jesus was with his buddies at the table. Everybody's having a good time, and they run out of wine. And Mary, being sensitive, is aware that this new couple is going to be very embarrassed. So she goes over to her son. Those of you who are mothers probably have done this. Son, they're out of wine. And what does he say? Well, what concern is it of mine? It's not my time. Get lost, Mom, you know. But she knows him better than he might know himself, as I think many mothers do. And walks away and simply says, do whatever he tells you. And of course, you know the story. Jesus says to the servants, fill this water jug with water. Now, these jugs we also saw samples of. They're humongous. They hold like 25 to 30 gallons of water because they were used for purification rites. So here's this humongous, and they fill it with water, and they dip in the pitcher and have this excellent tasting wine. Those of you who are lovers of wine, I know a few in here. It was a wonderful wine. His mind, his heart, we don't know what happened, but obviously it was changed. The second story is about a woman who we don't have a name for. She's just called a Syrophoenician woman. And this woman, who we don't have a name for, by the way, she wouldn't have been Jewish, and she would have been considered like an outsider. What she was doing, bursting into this house or wherever Jesus was, is pretty unusual to begin with for a woman in that culture, especially someone who wasn't Jewish. He is doing his thing, and she asked him, Master, will you cure my daughter? She's possessed of a demon. Again, a desperate mother, a mother who loves her child. He's not very nice in his response. You know, Jesus was always not, I mean, we think of him as just perfect, but what's his response? It's not right for the master to give the food meant for the children to the dogs. So he's basically calling her a dog. What's the matter?
Someone's parked on Forsyth. They will be ticketed and towed. The Cooper There's a Brown Cooper parked on Forsyth. You can't park out there.
So, where was I?
Dog.
Yeah. Okay, this does not stop her. This is a very determined woman. And she says, yes, that's true. But Master, even the dogs get to eat the scraps from the children's table. Now, in the Jerusalem Bible translation, it goes like this. Go home happy. Your daughter is cured. Go home happy. His mind, his heart was changed by a woman who is not a Jewish woman. Very interesting story to point out that this man is not doing what men in that culture did. Certainly not Jewish rabbis or Jewish leaders. So these are two stories of women who changed his mind. And I want to talk a little bit, many of you know that probably one of my favorite women in the scriptures is Mary Magdalene. Now, she's the only one given a surname. Mary of Magdala. That's her hometown most probably. The other women are known by their husbands or in relation, I think it's Mary's, Jesus' aunt is at the cross. I mean, it's their surname isn't given, but hers is. She is like the leader among the women, Mary Magdalene is. She was possessed of 7 demons and went to him and asked for healing. What does that mean? Demons in that time could have been physical illness. It could have been psychological illness. The number 7 means it was whole, entire. It was overwhelming. So her love for Jesus was comparable to this great healing that she received. Now, there are non-canonical writings, which you may or may not believe. They're not canonical, but they talk about this relationship as one of intimacy, not romantic intimacy, but the intimacy of when somebody really gets you. Mary Magdalene really got Jesus. She got his message, and he got her. You know, it's kind of like the relationship of Francis and Clare or John of the Cross and St. Teresa. There's a and I bet you have relationships like that where this person really gets you. This person might be your spouse, might be a good friend, and you really get them. So that's me now. That's my interpretation. But that's how I think of Mary Magdalene, and I'll go back to her later in the story and later in the talk because this relationship kind of pops up again. I do want to just make this comment. She is not the penitent woman that we read about, the prostitute or whatever she's been referred to. She is also not the same as Mary of Bethany, Martha's sister. Those are 3 different women that were sort of put together by a pope way back. But once again was made very clear, always in the Eastern Church it was clear. In the Latin Church, we got them mixed up. So we want to clear that up. Actually, in 1969, took a while, but Pope Paul VI said once and for all, this is her feast day, these are different people, she is Mary of Magdalene. So we got to be sure everybody's on that page. There are many stories of women in the scriptures that I could tell you about. I think I counted 10 that were unnamed and 12 that were named. But I want to pick out just one more in the Synoptic Gospels because this story is used a lot. This is taken from a sarcophagus, which is a burial tomb. And it's the woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years, bleeding. Now again, we got to look at the culture because when a woman was menstruating or bleeding, she was considered impure, and she had to be purified afterward before she could re-enter society. That's the custom. So here's this woman, and what does she do? She says, if I could just touch him, I know I would be cured. So in her desperation, she reaches through a crowd and touches his cloak, and she's cured. But he also notices it. This is either a very sensitive man or this is a very powerful energy. He notices it, and what does he say? Who touched me? And the apostles are like, are you kidding me? Look at this crowd. I mean, my gosh, everybody's pushing in. And he said, no, who touched me? And she, fearfully, but she owns up to it. Now, he could have said to her, how dare you? Now everybody you've touched is impure. We got to all go get purified, blah, 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 But he doesn't. He says this, go in peace. Go in peace. Wow. Very, very different reaction. So in my experience of these women, I keep seeing a Jesus who's not afraid to treat women with dignity and with compassion and with love, and he's not following the rules all the time, he's not always paying attention to the Jewish laws. Okay, now I'm going to leave the synoptics for a minute and go to John's Gospel because there's 3 stories in John that are unique. We mentioned one earlier, the story of Cana. But the first story I want to focus on is this lovely woman, the Samaritan woman. Now, it's worth reading that passage over just to dip into the theology that's explained in that story. Because here's Jesus, again, human situation. He's walking along and he's thirsty. And here's a woman at a well. She happens to be a Samaritan. Again, I think we all know that Samaritans are not welcome. They intermarry. They're considered pagan. They're not part of the Jewish community. They're looked down upon. They're not part. And he approaches her and says, can I have a drink? And she's like, you don't even have a ladle or a cup or anything. And I'm a Samaritan. She knew it was not appropriate. Then they start to talk, And they have quite a discourse. He does tell her everything about her life. He also tells her a lot about his life. I can give you living water. And he actually tells her, it's the first time we read this, that he's the Messiah, the chosen one. And she's so excited that she runs off to her village and tells everybody, you have got to meet this man. He knows everything about me, and he's the one. He's the Messiah. He's the chosen. You've got to meet him. He's phenomenal. And what do? They all go. They meet him, and guess what? They're all converted. The Samaritans. They're not even Jews. Already Jesus has to be thinking, I thought I came just for the Jews, but this isn't happening that way. She's the first woman to take his message to the Gentiles. And as the story says, they were converted. So that's a powerful story in John's Gospel. The next story I want to tell you, I don't have a picture of it. It's the adulteress, the woman caught in adultery. Now this story is unique because, again, this is the law. The law is if a woman's caught in adultery, she's to be stoned to death. So here's the scene. There's all these people all angry, ready to stone this woman to death. And there's Jesus, and what do? And he looks at them, turns it around. It's often what happens in these stories, notice. He just kind of turns things 180 degrees and says, well, the first person without sin, you throw the first stone. And then it says in the book, we have no idea what is happening, but he's writing in the dirt. What is he writing? When you leave it up to your imagination. One by one, they leave. And here's what's interesting. He says to her, woman, where are those who condemn you? There are none. And he said, neither do I condemn you. Whoa. And then, go and sin no more. So, a very unfair, in my mind, situation, because we never hear what happens to the man caught in this, if he was caught in this situation. But Jesus treats it very differently than the rules or the society would have treated it. And the last story I want to come back to is Mary Magdalene. I'm going to go back a minute though because of that slide. Mary Magdalene. This is the resurrection story in John's Gospel is unique. Okay? Here's the scene. Mary Magdalene has been with with Jesus, all through his crucifixion, his anointing, his burial, and then she comes back with Peter to check on him. And she and Peter, in this story, notice the tomb's empty. And what does Peter do? He goes home. Oh, it's empty. I mean, he doesn't hang around. She goes into the garden and is weeping. Where is Jesus? Where have they taken his body? And then she hears from who she thinks is a gardener. Why are you weeping, woman? Why are you weeping? And she says, oh, if you know where they've taken his body. She doesn't recognize Jesus. That resurrected body must be different. Then he says, Mary. And just the way he says it, there's that bond that I was talking about. She then knows who it is. Rabboni, she says. And of course, just like all of us, she wants to go and just grab him and hug him, you know. And he says, don't cling to me. I haven't gone to the Father yet. But go and tell the disciples what you've seen. And so Mary Magdalene is the first one to go to the apostles. And she has been known as the apostle to the apostles in the Eastern Church for all time. We've more recently taken that title up, the apostle to the apostles. So John has some very significant story of women. And we're going to leave the Gospels now because we want to move to the rest of the New Testament, to Paul's time. Now, I don't know how many women I counted in Paul's writings. There's a lot of them, but I chose 6. You may say, well, what about? And because there's Tabitha, there's all kinds of women. But a little bit about these 6 I want to point out to you. The first one, Lydia, she is a seller of purple dye. And you go, really? Well, purple dye was very, very expensive. It must have been very rare. And so, she's pretty wealthy. And she hears Paul preaching and is converted. And she converts her whole household. They never mention a husband. She's probably a wealthy widow or somebody. She then starts a small nucleus of a church in her home. That's the Church of Philippi. And because it's her home, she would have been the leader. So we're going to hear about these early house churches. They're not doing the celebration of Eucharist at the synagogue. They're doing it in these homes. And hers is one of them, and it's mentioned by Paul. Paul calls Lydia one of his partners in evangelization. Phoebe, she is called a deacon by Paul. The Greek word, diakonos. Now, we've got this big debate going on about deacons, but we're going to point out a couple of deacons here that, first of all, she is mentioned in Paul's gospel. She is a co-worker with Paul. He recognizes her as an evangelist, as a preacher. The next woman, I better stay on scripture all of it. Prisca. Now, Prisca is married to Aquila. And this couple, they become really good friends with Paul. They're all tent makers, so they share a common profession. They journey with him. In fact, they journey eventually back to Rome and are martyred, just as, following him is a dangerous business. But they are very instrumental in establishing the churches in Asia Minor with Paul. And as a couple, they had a house church and both presided. And Paul calls them his co-workers in Christ Jesus. Junia, she's also mentioned, I think, in Romans 16. Now, this is an important woman. That's on a gravestone, sarcophagus. But Junia is married to Andronicus. And I just want you to know that this is the only woman in the New Testament that is called an apostle. She's called an apostle by Paul. And then in the early church, people are saying, nah, she can't be an apostle, she's a woman. But in the 4th century, and I really like St. John Chrysostom, we use his name a couple times in this, he says of Junia, what a wonderful woman she must have been that Paul called her an apostle. So you have to argue with St. John Chrysostom if you don't think she was an apostle, but she's the only one given that title in the New Testament. I don't have a picture of Aphia or Nympha, but both of these women are leaders of house churches, and they're mentioned. Aphia is mentioned in Philemon, and Nympha, she's mentioned in Colossians, which is not directly a writing of Paul's, but it's in the stream of Paul's, what we call his circle of writings. All of these women that I mentioned to you have in some way been very instrumental in continuing the work. They work side by side with Paul. He attributes qualities to them, calls them deacon, calls them apostles, calls them evangelists. They're house church leaders. House church leaders would be the ones who would have presided at the meal. So these are all very significant for us as we do this work of history. Now, we're going to leave the scriptures and look at what happens after Paul and the letters and whatever we have written. And so now we have to rely on some research. And there's 2 women, by the way, these slides are from a packet. Future Church has a lot of information that I am sharing with you. So does a Women's Ordination Conference and many other resources. And so if you want to continue on your paper, I listed some of those resources. They're inexpensive. You could do a women's discussion group or a couples discussion group if you wanted to. These slides are from Future Church. And, okay, these 2 women are significant in this research. Uti Eisen, she wrote a very comprehensive book, Women Office Holders in Early Christianity. She has all kinds of documentation in this book, epigraphical documentation, from tombstones, from mosaics, from legal documents. It's quite a tome. And Dorothy Urban, Harriet and I were talking before, I don't remember the year, Harriet, but the 2 of us with a bunch of students went down to St. Louis U, and Dorothy Urban, quite a character, was presenting. Now, she has a doctorate in theology with an emphasis on biblical and Near Eastern and archaeology. And she goes down to St. Louis U to do this presentation. She's been all over the country. You can YouTube her. She's dead now, but wonderful, creative, and kind of wild. Not wild, that's not the right word. She was just a character. How do I explain her? She is very interested in the things that she has uncovered in her travels in Rome and Asia Minor. So we're going to look at some of her stuff. Okay, back to the script here. Okay, the first slide. This is from, by the way, this was found in the Mount of Olives, where some of us recently were, only in 1903. This is from a tombstone. Here lies the minister and bride of Christ, Sophia the deacon, the second Phoebe. She fell asleep, blah, blah, blah. So this is already a mention of, I think deacons were probably pretty prevalent in the early church, but here's a reference to 2 of them. I don't know how clear this will be. This is a picture from the Catacomb of Calixtus of the multiplication of loaves of fishes that was celebrated. This is like a Eucharistic celebration. It was typical. It has 7 men sitting, really reclining at a table. It has fish on the table, and then there's 7 baskets of bread, and sometimes there's 12 baskets. And I show you that picture because in this picture, there are 7 women there, and I got an enlargement. 7 women, same way, at a table, fish, and there's 7 baskets of bread on either side. So this, to many of us, and you can tell they're women by their hairstyles. Some have earrings, you can see that. One has a veil, celebrating Eucharist. Okay. This slide is 2 women. They're from 2 different centuries. It's probably dated somewhere in the 4th century. It's located in the catacombs in Rome. These 2 women are dressed from different periods. So we know one is probably from the 4th century, the one on the left, and the one on the right, Petronella, she's from the 1st century. I put those on there because if you look at the picture, there are scrolls, there is scripture. So, up here, that would be more of the 4th century. That's a codex, that's a manuscript. And down here, we have what we call a basket or a casket of scrolls. Both of these women, if it was on their catacombs, that would have been the most significant thing of their life, was teaching and preaching the word. And I show you that because this is St. Paul pictured the same way. With, see him holding the scroll, and at the bottom here we have the basket of scrolls. So that was typical of the era. So we have these 2 women. We'll come back to more women who preaching. Okay. This is in the catacombs of Priscilla, and the top part there is Jesus with the lamb, the good shepherd. The bottom part, this part, is the life, three scenes from the life of women. And I would like to do a close-up on that. The woman in the middle, now this is Dorothy Urban's interpretation, so take it however you want it. But if you notice, she is in the garb of a deacon. She's wearing a dalmatic with the big sleeves and has a veil on. Paul reminded the women that when they prophesied, they should wear a veil to distinguish them from the prophets of the pagan religion. So when you see a woman with a veil like that, she's probably in the role of teaching or prophesying. Over on the left, here, this is a bishop. The bishops were always pictured in a straight-back chair, a throne-type chair, or any leader would be pictured that way. And he is most probably a bishop because he has that cloak on, a woolen cloak that is a symbol of his bishop, and he has his hand on her shoulder, and she is wearing what looks like a chasuble. So the interpretation of this is ordination of priesthood. Who is this figure way over here? This is most probably a figure of Mary, the mother of Jesus. She's holding the baby. She too is sitting on a straight back chair. I left these slides out, but often they pictured Mary in the straight back chair of a bishop to show her authority in the early church. So we have other slides of her that way. And she has that same cloak on. This is an interpretation, but we want to consider it with other interpretations. Okay, this is a mosaic in again, a catacomb. Later in time, though, now I'm going to be showing you about 4 different women who were given the title presbyter. This one, Vitalia, this is 4th or 5th century. If you look closely, maybe you can make it out, I don't know. These 4 books at the top have the names of the evangelists on them. Joanna, Marcus, Matthews. She's a preacher of the word, but she's also standing in the position of Eucharistic celebration. She's the presider, and would have been typical of her time. There's a table, she has the vestment on, so forth. Take that into consideration with a few other slides that we have. Here lies the presbyter tale. Now this was written on her on her tombstone, she's from the 4th or 5th century. Presbyter is the name used for priest. So we have Cale. And then I don't have a slide for this person. It's a written document. Flavia Vitalia. She is called a Presbytera Sancta in a legal document. After Constantine in 313, and the church became universally the church of the whole realm, the celebration started moving into public places, out of the homes, because it was a public religion. So they had legal roles as a priest. They had legal documents about burials, legal documents about money, so forth and so on. So her title is mentioned in a legal document as a Presbytera Sancta. And then we have another woman. I don't think I have a slide on this. Okay, this is where they're all listed. Letta. On her tombstone, it says this: sacred to her good memory, Letta the presbyter lived 40 years, 8 months, and 9 days, for whom her husband set up this tomb. Now, these 4 women, who we pretty much can say were priests, are functioning as priests, you could still say, well, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. But we also have a quote from a pope that I think really shows some concern about the fact that women were presiding at Eucharist. And this is what Pope Gelasius I in 494 wrote. He wrote a lengthy letter to bishops in southern Italy and Sicily, Santa and Mary. And among these things he said, he addressed his great unhappiness about the priesthood of women. Nevertheless, we have heard to our annoyance that divine affairs have come to such a low state that women are encouraged to officiate at the sacred altars and to take part in all matters imputed to the offices of the male sex, to which they do not belong. So, if it wasn't happening, I don't know why Pope Gelasius was so concerned. But that is a written document. That's the kind of work that these women have done in their research. Okay, I have just two more little sections on this. Uh-oh. Come on. On many, I have 2 sarcophaguses of women. Wealthy women would have carved what was like most important in their life. And on this sarcophagus, the woman is preaching. And you can see this, in her hand is the scriptures, and this is the, let's see if I can do it, teaching gesture. And around her, those figures carved around her are all from stories in the scripture. Why is this not open? That's the full panel. And maybe you can pick out, see the third from the right, that's Jesus coming in on the donkey. That looks like Zacchaeus at the end. Each of those figures is from the Bible. So she was a preacher of Scripture. We have another sarcophagus like this. And this woman, too, who lived 330 to 360, was a preacher of the Word. You see, for her, the person to her right is Eve, and to her left, I believe, is Jesus curing the paralytic. Here's a full panel. And here's a close-up. So we have women who definitely were known for preachers of the Word, teachers of the Word. And finally, well, not exactly finally, but almost finally, I want to talk again about another deacon. This is Olympus, and she was in Constantinople. And again, we have St. John Chrysostom, who says, he put her in charge of all the deacons assigned to the Church of Hagia, and this is what he addressed his letter as, the Reverend, God-loved Deacon Olympus. So we know pretty sure without a doubt that there were women serving as deacons. Now, this is the last set of slides, and this is from the Church of St. Praxedis, 9th century. In this mosaic, there are 4 women, okay? We're going to look at them one at a time. Mary, the mother of Jesus, always prominent, always. Then we have St. Praxedis. She's from the 1st century and was the leader of a house church, and a church was built in her honor. Her sister, the St. Carondelet, and she too is from the 1st century. They are daughters of someone mentioned in the New Testament. The important thing is they both had house churches, and then churches were built in their honor. Then we have on this panel Theodora Episcopa. Episcopa is the title for bishop. And it's kind of up here, it's hard to see her title. You notice too, she has a square halo. The others all have, have round halos. And that is because the square halo was an indication she was still living. And so this is 9th century. And also it's carved Theodora Episcopa in a pillar. So, what does this tell us? Well, we pretty much evidence that in the early church, at least until about the 9th or 10th century, women did serve as office holders in the church. And wonder, the question, why not anymore? What happened? And really, that would take another whole evening to talk about. But we certainly know the patriarchal system, both in the leadership of the countries and in the leadership of the church. We certainly know, too, that women were really considered the temptresses or the source of sin. So their importance, their leadership, at least as office holders, was reduced, but not necessarily their leadership in the church. And that's what I want to comment on. This is really pretty much the last section if you're wondering where is this all going to go and how we do it on time. Okay. This is the concluding part. So what happened to women? You know, they're not ordained as deacons and priests anymore. They didn't just go away. You know, right away, early Middle Ages, we have these wonderful mystics and teachers and theologians. Hildegard of Bingen, you might be hearing about her when you do the mystics. She was later named a doctor of the church. Julian of Norwich, I mean, her writings are legendary. Then, Catherine of Siena. Catherine of Siena was very influential with the Pope. Was part of talking him into going back to Rome. He fled Rome. He was kind of scared. Things were going on. And he was living in Avignon. She said, you belong in Rome. And he also very much entrusted many missions to her. So she was very influential. And Teresa of Avila, a couple centuries later, Dominican, is a reformer, a theologian, a mystic. Her books are still profoundly, I can remember a student reading Interior Castle years ago, loving it. I mean, her works are still very much formational in our spirituality. It took a while for the church to name them doctors, but they did in 1970. So 600 years for one and 400 for the other, but it happened. The doctor of the church is a special title that's given for someone who has really made outstanding contributions to theology or dogma. So these women are recognized, as is, of course, Teresa of Lisieux, kind of everybody's favorite, because her way was the little way. You know, if you're not a great saint, you know, you go off to Africa and you go off to Japan and you do these great things, or you're martyred for your faith, you can always follow Teresa of Lisieux because hers was the little way. And the little way was these daily acts of kindness, charity, self-sacrifice, discipline. She's really an awesome saint. And was given, along with Francis Xavier, the title Patron of the Missions. There's this sister who died like at 26, never left her convent, Patron of the Missions. So you can do great things. You can do great things in very small ways. She was named a doctor of the church more recently. The date was at 97. That was kind of exciting. More modern, I'm sure you know Rose Philippine Duchesne was made a saint very recently. You know, the work she's done in St. Charles, anybody connected with the Sisters of the Sacred Heart. She, along with many missionaries, sisters in my own community included, came to this country because they wanted to teach the Native Americans. They wanted them to know about who Jesus is. So we have Rose Philippine. More recently, Teresa of Calcutta, who, of course, gave her life to the people in India, especially to those who were dying. But I just want to mention briefly religious apostolic orders, because if you don't know this, in the 17th century, these apostolic orders sprang up. Visitation were the first. Now, here's what happened. Nuns had to be cloistered. That's the rule. You have to stay in the convent. Outside in society, there were so many needs. There's sick, there's poor, there's uneducated, and the needs aren't being met. You know, there's no social services, there's no public hospitals. So these women wanted to do something about this. And the visitation, Jane de Chantal and de Sales, Francis de Sales said, we're going to start a group of women quietly who were going to be able to go out. And they didn't totally get all the way free. They get semi-cloistered. Then you had the Daughters of Charity right after that. That's why they're called daughters, so they could get around that rule of cloister. And then shortly after that, you had the Sisters of St. Joseph, of which I joined that gang of women. And always it was the same thing. How can we do this so that we can go out and serve the dear neighbor and not have to be cloistered? The church wanted the women cloistered. So women have always kind of subtly been, or maybe not so subtly, trying to find ways to get around some of these, what I would call church rules. These same communities sent missionaries, of course, to our country, to America, both North and South America, and you know the effect. Today, colleges, universities that were founded by women, hospitals, whole medical systems, Mercy Health System, Ascension, the SSM, that's what I'm trying to think. SSM and the Benedictine Health System, those are all founded by women. I don't know all their names. I've read about some of them. How do they do that? You know. So we've always had women leaders, and even in the social justice areas, some that stand out, like Dorothy Day. She, you know, the Catholic Worker Movement. And Simone Campbell, she's the executive director of Network. It's a Catholic lobbying network. And she's the Nuns on the Bus person. And I think you know Helen Prejean. She is a sister of St. Joseph, I'm proud to say, who wrote Dead Man Walking and is such an advocate for getting rid of, or what's the word I want to say, the death penalty. So women have been leaders in the church, without a doubt. And some given very significant roles of leadership in terms of within what they could have, you know, like chancellor or director of religious ed or whatever. The question is, where are we today? And I just want to share this quote. It's interesting what's happened in the last few days from Pope Francis as we end. At the Day of Peace, January 1st, he said this: women are givers. Women are givers and mediators of peace and should be fully included in decision-making processes. Because when women can share their gifts, the world finds itself more united and more peaceful. There, on your paper, I listed some other quotes. There are many, many wonderful teachings of our bishops and our popes about women in leadership. There is a disagreement, though, that I think we have to look at. Because are women fully equal if they can't share in the governance in the church? And at this time, governance in the church is for ordained ministers. And only men can be ordained deacons, priests, and bishops. So even though there's this verbal recognition of the need for women, as Pope Francis has said, to share in the decision making, it's kind of like this, because, you know, we're not fully equal until we can share in the orders, because that's where the governance is. Now, I want to just say something real personal. I am not interested in being a priest or a deacon. Any woman who's called to it, I say, great, go for it. For me, the patriarchal system is still a big block. The hierarchical. But I do understand that in some ways that's appealing to some people. It is efficient, perhaps. Looking at Mary Fitzgibbon. When I was elected to leadership, she worked with 5 of us who did leadership together. We didn't have a mother superior or provincial. Our idea in our community was a collaborative team style. So it would be difficult for me, if that makes sense to you, to be a part of a hierarchical, patriarchal system. But there are many women who do feel called to this vocation. I think women have many ways to lead, but I'm hoping that the dialogue will continue, and I'm going to end there. I can't even see the time, but I do want to just give you a question. We're going to do a stand-up break, and then we have a little time for Q&A if you want to ask some questions. Okay? Here's my thought. What woman has influenced you in your life? What woman has helped you in your faith formation, or helped you to be more compassionate, helped you to care more about the earth? And what would it be like for you if a woman was preaching, or if a woman was presiding a Eucharist? Just think about that. And then let's do a stand-up and see if you have any questions and see if I have any answers. Thank you. It'll take a few minutes. Oh, all right. Jerry said...
Why don't we go ahead and ask a few questions now, and we'll go upstairs and have a glass of wine if we can...
Okay, we're going to have yes.
Okay, I get the first question.
You have the first. Jerry has the first question. Here's the mic. I know I strayed away from the mic. I'll repeat this question.
What exactly laying down the rule that women could not be deacons or priests? And what is the theological or scriptural basis for that?
Okay, he asked, when did the church lay down this rule that women could not be deacons or priests, etc.? And what's the theological reason for that? I don't think there was a specific moment. I don't know. Gary, was there a moment? I'm not aware of it. I think the practice evolved because of the worldview at the time, of the fact that there was a degradation of women. I mean, I can't answer that. I don't think there was a specific time. I think it had more to do with the social and cultural values of the time.
But is there any type of scriptural or theological or any rationale behind that?
Tradition is really behind it, because I cannot give you that. I don't know. Mary, you have an answer? She has an answer. A hint.
That when we had the great schism in our church in 1054, most of your slides that you had up until then, women were included. But when the Eastern Church and the Western Church split, I think that's around the time it started happening. And there's a lot of theologians that believe until we get back to fully uniting the Eastern Church and the Western Church, we miss out on that.
Well,
So that was intended before.
it's true. It did change after the 9th or 10th century. I really think it's a matter of symbolism. You know, how do we symbolize Christ? How do we symbolize this sacred meal? There's a difference of opinion. I mean, Gary and I totally disagree. We may want to speak up if he wants to. But we do. We just totally disagree on how you relive what Jesus did at the Last Supper. You know, he said in his introduction, I will quote, I have strong personal beliefs about that, but they're personal. It's not where the church is officially, as we just heard from Francis. Could that change? I believe it could change. I hope it changes. Just personally, I have 2 nieces who go to Episcopalian churches. They like a woman leader. And they don't like what our church teaches. That's just 2 of my nieces. Maybe you have someone in your family. Our society has gone one way in terms of development of women. You and I talked, Jerry, about women in business and in business leadership. But our church seems to say, we'll accept women as leaders, but not this way. It doesn't say it doesn't accept women as leaders in many ways, but not this way. Not in priesthood. Not in orders.
When you see a trend at all for women, to eventually recognize this is leaking back and especially
I did. Well, Mary asked, do I see a trend, any hope at all in women being ordained? Let's start with deacons. There's a book mentioned on there written by Gary somebody. It's comprehensive about women deacons. There doesn't seem to be a rationale, certainly, because there's such a need in so many areas of our world. And that's what the bishops in the Amazon brought up. There's so many of their people don't have Eucharist, don't have trained, and they have sisters, religious women there who are trained, but they can't do these things. So, yes, I was very hopeful, but his last letter of 2 days ago to the bishops kind of put a kibosh on that for now. But somebody said it doesn't close it. Why?
No, just wondering why. Yeah, why do you think that's what you put there?
One of the things he says in the letter is that Christ is the spouse of the church, and the priest represents Christ. So it wouldn't be appropriate for a woman to be the spouse of the church. That's one of the things he said. I tried to read it as carefully as I could. That's how I read it. That's, yeah. Harriet.
Well, historically, when you go back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, and of course, Rome ruled the world, there ruled all those countries, women were goddesses, and in a way, women had a different area of respect than in the Jewish world.
Yeah.
Historically.
Yeah. But then we have Aristotle, who didn't think too highly of women.
Kind of stepped on it.
Yes.
I have a girlfriend who's going through the lay formation program through the Archdiocese.
Mm-hmm.
And so how is that an opportunity for women to do more in our church? I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, lay formation, men and women.
Okay.
So we have women who are pastors, who are not so much in this diocese, but we have sisters who have served as pastors, who have a visiting priest who, when they celebrate Eucharist, I attended where one of our sisters did the preaching and all of that, but the priest did the consecration part. He was an elderly priest and he was retired. That is not unusual, even in our country. It's very not unusual in South America, where our sisters. So lay leadership, yes, we need lay leadership. We have very good programs to help with that. But that's not training them for ordination. For ordination. Yeah, Gary.
Linda, as spiritual director to many women, as provincial leadership for how many women are in your community?
What are they? 350
women
in our province.
What do you say to a woman who's really angry?
Yeah.
How do you spiritually counsel them?
Good question.
How have you and
Santa.
How have you put that together for yourself? You don't seem so enraged all the time.
Yeah, I was. I'll be really honest with you. I was angry at the church before I came here, though. Before I came to the Newman Center, I was younger. That doesn't do much, really. I have read a lot of feminist theologians, and there's really two categories, basic categories of feminist theologians. One is the revolutionist, and they can't see any hope. It is such a male-dominated religion that they vote by walking, and women do that. But there's another group. Elizabeth Johnson is one of them, and many more. Elizabeth Schussler-Fiorenza. They are feminist theologians who are reformist, and they believe that there is great, the seeds of liberation for all, not just women, homosexuality, other issues that we're looking at in the church. So they see the potential there. And that is the group that I most am attracted to, that group of theologians who I've read and have heard. And anger's not a bad thing, but if you hold on to it too long, it really doesn't work in your favor. You have to find a way to move beyond that. And as I said, some move beyond it by leaving. There were a number of young women who have said to me, "Why do you stay in this church?" And for me, what I have said is, it's because of Jesus. I mean, you heard the stories. These are interpretations through a woman's eyes. Might be a little different through a woman's eyes. But, I have fallen in love. And this church that I'm a part of keeps that love and community alive. So, for women who really are struggling, I say it has to be a source of inspiration. It has to be a treasure for you. It has to be a legacy for you that is worth it. But you keep the conversation going. You keep hoping that, that we will more and more grow in this area. But if you just give up, well, then you give up. And then where are you going to find that, Well, the Episcopalian Church. And many they do. Yeah, way back there. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
I find life and balance with Mary. It's like Jesus is my best friend, and Mary is too. Ever since I was a little tiny kid, we love Mary too. So that balance.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really helps.
This is
we
what
need all of us.
This is what happened to me when we were in Cana. I had this tremendous sense of Mary being able to get to Jesus like nobody else could. And it's like, I know we're celebrating weddings and marriages and all that here and renewing vows, but I'm so aware that if you really think about it, sometimes you just want to say, Mary, do this for me, And there's just something about that. You're right. She's very, very special. Yeah. Good.
Did you mention about this was it a nun in the 200 or 300 AD Egeria that did the...
Oh, Egeria? Oh yeah, we talked about her.
I love that. I've told more people about her.
Oh.
And can you mention...
Well, some of you now have heard this 100 times. We just got back from the Holy Land, but Egeria, the reason we know about so many of these holy places is she was a nun who went on a pilgrimage for about a year of her life. What a sabbatical, huh? And she wrote a diary There's another leader in the church that we don't talk about that much, this sister, this Ageria. And her diary says basically this: we did the holy event at the holy place at the holy time. And so she describes each of these events. The liturgical year was just developing at the time she wrote this. Before then, we celebrated every time we celebrate Eucharist, it was resurrection. That was what we celebrated. But Basil got this idea of let's do it throughout the year, like a whole event from Christmas to Easter to Pentecost. So it's her diary that gives us a lot of the rituals and readings and so forth we have on Easter Vigil and so forth.
Let's do one more, then go ahead.
Yeah, time for wine. Huh? Yes, Susan.
So here we are, and thank you for being a great teacher to me and a great leader in our church. And so when you think about people who have informed you in your faith life, you were right front and center. So thank you very much for that. So what can we do? Here we are, we want to go forward, we want to be part of this church, we want to be in communion, in community with the church in so many ways. What could we do to help advance that?
For me, the first thing is personal formation. What you read helps expand your consciousness. And I don't know how Richard Rohr's done, but I find him very inclusive, and he seems to get it. And he's a man, so I'm quoting at least one man here, Elizabeth Johnson, who I love. Yeah, I didn't put her on there, but she's another one of my very favorites. Ilia Delio. No, Ilia Delio wrote like Christ in Evolution. She's a Franciscan, Christ in Evolution. It doesn't matter. Reading will expand our consciousness. We've got to expand our consciousness. And the conversations and the dialogue and maybe a study group and that sort of thing. When you have the opportunity, say what you believe and what you're looking. That's why I asked you, what do you want for the church? It's your church. The church is the people of God. So what do you want for it? What do you hope for it? And you make that known. It took a little guts for me to do this tonight. I'll be really honest, not because of you. But I'm like, am I going to do this justice? When they asked me this, I'm like, are you kidding me? This is a huge topic. And, I've been to lots of conferences, and I'm really not, up there with all that. But I did a lot of study and reading and reflecting myself to be able to even present this little piece for you. So that's helpful. So read, ask the questions. Ask that question. What's on the other side? Ask Gary. He'll tell you.
It's almost like we're coming full circle back to the house church.
Yes.
This idea that women are having this conversation, and here we are in community and saying, okay, how do we continue that? And
some choose that. They choose to do Eucharist in the home together. And that's another way. For me, though, then you're missing out, as I would say to the women, that's fine, but there's a bigger thing here that happens when you celebrate together on Sunday. It's a bigger mixture. And you're going to hear about things you're not so fond of hearing about. And vice versa. So,
Sister Linda, Jerry said no more questions. This is not a question.
You can't stop her, Jerry. No way.
I just want to say, you've just kind of, you chipped away at the ice. Please find time to come back and talk to us some more. I would love to know more about everything you talked about tonight. It was great.
I can answer Linda's question. Did she do it justice? I'll say she did it justice. Please join us. And I'm sure